I'm delighted to say it's time for Richard Tice. It's Friday. It's Tice time. Welcome, Richard. You're looking very well.
Well, thank you very much.
Actually.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've all had our makeup as always on a Friday.
You've somehow got a better deal than I have today.
Well, obviously, you know, maybe I just spend a little bit more time. Who knows, Mike?
There hasn't been any money changing hands, is there, by any chance? But,
not yet.
Not yet. But listen, let's what a dreadful day, right? Absolutely. You can't believe that we're in the same country as we were 2 days ago.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I wonder whether it has any linkage to the Scots coming down with their bagpipes and their coats.
It could well do
to the football.
Yeah,
and you know, is that going to play into the Scots' hands or is that going to play into the?
Well,
the
do you know they
English
do
team
like
hands?
a bit of rain up in Scotland, don't they? I remember the first time I moved up there back in I think it was 2002 in June. 26 days of rain was what they had in Glasgow.
Welcome to Scotland,
Yeah,
Mike
welcome
Graham.
to Scotland. You know, I mean, my parents are both Scottish. I'll be supporting Scotland, as I think I may have told you before.
Which I do have a major problem with.
That's
I mean,
fine.
You know,
That's fine. I mean, we are all part of the great United Kingdom
We are
until
indeed.
Boris
We are
manages
indeed.
to screw that up as well. But what an amazing week. Tell me, do you think Boris Johnson's loss to Lib Dems last night in this by-election is historic? I'm not. I mean, it's a midterm election, by-election. Lib Dems win those quite a lot.
It was completely unexpected. As we were canvassing, you know, we could see things were changing in the last week. And on Wednesday, I said to people, I said something extraordinary could just happen here,
Right.
and it really has. And the reality is that whilst the Tories have been focusing on the north, and Labour have ignored their base in the north, and that's why the Tories won Hartlepool, but in the south, again, in reverse, the Tories have been basically ignoring their base. And in Cheshire and Amersham, I mean, the whole constituency is literally being ploughed up, dug up, carved up
Yes.
by this absurdly bloated, wasteful project HS2. And, you know, this was an opportunity for all of the constituents to say, enough,
Yes.
we've been ignored. So there's a massive protest.
So do you think
even
it's
though
not
there's
so
an,
much-
there's an inconsistency because actually Lib Dem national policy is to support HS2.
Yes.
But it's basically a massive protest vote and also against the planning reforms that most people haven't yet focused on. But I know privately Tory MPs in the south of England are utterly petrified about the impact of these planning reforms
Because,
if they go ahead, which they probably now won't.
Right, it's because the swing is huge, isn't it? I mean, it's a massive move. I presume then, from what you've said, many of the people who voted Lib Dem were actually disaffected Tories then.
So actually, the majority of people who voted Lib Dem were Labour voters. So the Labour vote completely collapsed. We almost beat Labour.
Really?
And we would have loved to have done that. And of course, we'd have liked more votes. But it's difficult because what you're seeing now across the country, you saw it in Hartlepool, you've seen it now in Chesham, is that voters realise if they coalesce around one candidate, actually they can change the MP in that seat and make a difference.
Right.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And if people feel that this is the only way to beat Boris Johnson and the Tories, you know, maybe then, as I say, there will be a lot more of that. And it was pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's probably one of the most seismic swings ever. John Renton later may have the exact numbers on that, the history of it.
But what I find
it's pretty
interesting,
extraordinary.
and if it is largely around HS2, and it could be other things as well, it could be disaffection with, you know, the way that the government's handling all sorts of things. But if that is the case, and then you look at Hartlepool, and that was a kind of single issue election as well, are we then going to see that, a kind of single issue type campaigning going on when you see one election falling because of one particular thing?
I think completely understandably, voters want to know that they're being listened to in the local area, and they focus on things that are important in a local constituency. And so in Hartlepool, people wanted some of Boris's red wall money, and in Chesham and Amersham, people do not want the whole constituency being carved up for this wasteful HS2 project. I think probably there was also, you'll have had a lot of Tory voters stay at home who basically are sort of against the fact that Boris has sort of delayed easing the restrictions. So there will have been a bit of that. And, you know, cumulatively, it all shows that actually voters really can make a difference. The turnout was obviously down at just over 52%.
It's not terrible for a by-election.
It's not terrible for a by-election, but I do think that a lot. The extraordinary thing is, you know, the Tory MPs have literally this morning no idea why it happened. They've no idea they had no idea that it was going to happen, and that says something about the extent to which they've just been taking their base for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a couple of ministers on talk radio this morning, obviously quite shell-shocked not using words like, massacre and disaster. And I mean, as well as I do, Richard, they're all trained not to use those kind of words normally, no matter how bad it is, but they're all saying it.
Well, and that is because that's exactly what it is. It is absolutely seismic. And look, I mean, I tweeted out this morning, congratulations to the Lib Dems. This is what they're really good at. They ran they had 50 people out almost every day. It was quite extraordinary. And so, you've got to give credit where credit's due. And obviously we'd have liked more voters ourselves. We're building a new political brand. It takes time.
Yes.
And, I think that, but fundamentally, voters are looking around. There's no question about that. They're looking around saying, what else is out there? We're living in a one-party state. We're all being ignored. Yeah. We're in a sort of authoritarian dictatorship. And frankly, we've had enough. And so I think, there's there'll be quite a shock in the air of.
I mean, there still seems anecdotally for me to be a lot of people who are still quite loyal to the Tories, despite the fact that they don't appear to be doing very much that a Conservative Party would otherwise be doing. But they're also still quite fond of Boris Johnson. I did a show a couple of weeks ago saying, what does he have to do to become unpopular? He seems to be able to just ride roughshod through everything. I mean, even this latest Cummings outburst where, he produced perhaps the least surprising news of the week, in which apparently the Prime Minister thinks Matt Hancock's effing useless. Well, we all thought that anyway, but that didn't even touch him, really.
No, I think the thing about Boris is that he is an individual with voters is popular. And I think Boris has got so many frailties that actually many people, all of us, frankly, can see a little bit of our own frailties in Boris. And people quite like that. And I think that the other thing is it's easier for a Conservative voter to abstain than to go elsewhere. Whereas I think that Labour voters in the North who voted for Brexit and the Brexit Party in the European elections, they started to lend their vote. So it's been easier for them. So I think we've got another by-election, which we're not standing in Batley and Spend, on July the 1st. And it's almost guaranteed that Labour will lose that, again, in the North. But yes, I mean, this issue this week with more Cummings revelations, the thing about what Dominic Cummings is doing is some of the stuff that he's telling us is actually important information, some of which we knew, some of which we didn't. The problem is, because of the way he was discredited over Barnard Castle, because of the frankly just pretty unpleasant way in which he's gone about revealing all this information, he's being dismissed and discredited, and understandably Tory MPs are basically sort of coalescing around in a protective veil around Hancock.
And also that he's kind of giving them the opportunity to rubbish his claims, because, to be honest, if I was in a court of law, I don't think producing a WhatsApp message screenshot is actually evidence of anything, because you could have just written that.
Exactly. And, he promised other evidence to the Select Committee, which he hasn't delivered. So his credibility is frankly disappearing down a plug hole. Hancock is probably looking safer than ever, even though, frankly, we all know that he is useless. Frankly, we all know that he is a liar. I proved that he was a liar regarding the Nightingale hospitals when he stood in the House of Commons on the 30th of December and said they hadn't been decommissioned. Right. They're still on standby, and I'd stood in the empty hall.
You were there,
So the man is he is a proven liar in the House of Commons.
Yes.
And if he's done it once, he'll do it again and again.
Well, I must admit, I asked the question that very afternoon after that sort of WhatsApp message was revealed. I said, I actually thought being effing useless was a qualification for getting into the cabinet. I didn't realise that actually that was a bad thing.
That's clearly why you and I are not there.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Because, I mean, you can certainly name more than one of them who you might describe as not exactly very good at the job.
I mean, they have, you can absolutely.
Richard Tice is here with me. We've been talking about the Lib Dems, the Tories, the Labour Party. What about the big game tonight, Richard? England-Scotland. I might ask you for a prediction later. He doesn't like the fact that I'm supporting Scotland. I mean, I don't know why. Why we're in a very broad church here.
A very broad church, of course.
But of course, the big story in the front of the Times today, UEFA threat over Euros final. UEFA threatening to take the final, which is supposed to be happening in Wembley, to Hungary, if in fact we don't let all of their bods in, their VIPs in, without having to quarantine. I mean, this is typical for UEFA, isn't it?
Completely typical. Whether it's UEFA or FIFA, you would expect this sort of arrogant elitism from these groups. They essentially, when they arrive, they actually think they're then sort of taking over the running of the country. Right. Mind you, that may not be a bad thing given who's running the country at the moment. But no, seriously, it's outrageous to think that they can come in and that there's some form of COVID shield that descends from space.
Well, presumably they'll just
them.
move the COVID shield from Cornwall, where it was last weekend.
Of course, yes.
Because there isn't one there either.
No, it's moved from Cornwall.
Yeah.
It now will sort of descend pod-like around each individual, and everyone will be protected. And sadly, us mere mortals and normal people, we can't benefit from that.
It is extraordinary, isn't it, that we have a country supposedly divided by people like you and I who think that we could actually lift all the regulations if we wanted to on Monday, which is when it was supposed to happen, and other people who go, oh, well, we've got to be cautious. We've got to... I mean, did you see the Hungary game the other day where there's 63,000 people in the stadium? Some people don't like the fact that people had to show a vaccination passport to get in, but they still had a full stadium.
Yeah.
Why can't we have that?
Well, and the extraordinary thing is we've had pilots here where, you've had lots of people in a nightclub, you've had lots of people in stadium. There was up in Edgbaston the other day. They've all gone absolutely fantastic. They've proved the data, and we were told it's following the data, and yet now actually we're not following the data.
No.
We're following a bunch of bonkers scientists
if
who've
we
got
are
a
following the data,
completely different agenda.
Well, what we're also seeing is that the number of daily coronavirus cases, which is going through the roof, which is what seems to be worrying them all, is having no real bearing on admissions to hospital, because what we do know is even from this Delta variant, formerly known as the Indian variant, which apparently we're not allowed to say, even though the Kent variant is still called the Kent variant. I'm not quite sure how that works. But anyway, it's less than 1% of people who are infected with this variant who end up going to hospital. And we've still got numbers of deaths really, really low, less than 50 a week. And so, I don't know what data they're actually following.
I don't know at all. I'm just thinking maybe the next variant will be the woke variant.
The woke variant, yeah, that could be it.
The data, there has been a complete shift, and there has been a break in the linkage between infections and hospitalizations and, thankfully, deaths.
Yeah.
But the government, they don't want to, they don't want to take the benefit of that. And we've got this bizarre situation now where essentially you've got our own planes, EasyJet planes, Ryanair planes, now being flown from England, from the UK, over to Europe to be used in Europe because we can't take advantage. Our government won't let us take advantage of our successful vaccination programme. And I now genuinely fear that we are looking at further lockdowns and restrictions being imposed in the autumn when, guess what, some 2.5-year-old, like Ian Collins's youngster the other day, Ian was saying, had a sniffle and had to have a PCR test and is sort of grounded for 14 days. I mean, it's just utterly nuts.
It's mad, isn't it?
Utterly nuts.
And again, despite what they said they would do, the government are edging back again on asking people to come back to work in offices. So once again, we are left with a sort of ghost towns all over the country because people aren't being told, get back into work.
And, I talked about this literally a year ago in central London, the devastation for city centres, for town centres. People just haven't got their heads around yet at all. But it's going to be absolutely seismic unless you say, actually, we need to get back to work. I am hearing now from employers, more and more people realise, actually, there is a real benefit. Solving problems, brainstorming, creating, designing things around a table collectively, and they realise the benefit of that. Slightly differently, of course, before we finish, to the creativity and ingenuity of one Cristiano Ronaldo, which brings me on to my deal of the week.
Deal of the week, yes.
Deal of the week, Mike. Now this is
thing, right.
So the two candidates for deal of the week this week was Cristiano Ronaldo, who by just moving 2 Coke bottles, that was a £2.8 billion move of those. So that was an extraordinary deal. But the other candidate for winner of the deal of the week is Liz Truss.
Okay.
With her the signing of the trade deal between the UK and Australia, which she sort of negotiated single-handedly, and she's achieved 2 things. Firstly, I think she has actually, to a fair degree, provided a sensible sort of phasing in of tariff-free imports of meat on beef and lamb. But most importantly of all, she has, of course, reduced the price of alcohol coming in from Australia to the UK. Julia, I know, is utterly thrilled about that. And so, but I think on balance, very close though it is, the deal of the week has to be Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo, I think that was absolutely remarkable. And the way that he did it as well was superb,
Just superb.
Very
and I gather, not only
understated.
that, I gather he earns almost £1 million every time he posts an Instagram message.
Yeah.
I mean, this is quite extraordinary.
I don't know how he does that, but I'd be quite keen to find out.
We need some tips,
He's
don't
an
we?
extraordinary man. And then he goes out and quite happily scores 2 goals just to prove he's still the greatest footballer in the world. And he's 36. I mean, they reckon he'll be playing well into his 40s. He's so fit and he looks after himself so well. It's remarkable.
Just incredible, unlike some of us.
Well, listen, I've spent £1 million on myself, but not to keep fit, I have to say. So I've been left behind in places that charge me VAT, I'm afraid. Richard Tice, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be back.